This story, well, it's complicated. It starts as a personal tragedy, but then becomes something much bigger, maybe even an international incident. We're looking into the death of Prakriti Lamsal, a young Nepali student at the Kalinga Institute of Industrial Technology in Odisha, in India.
Right.
Now, at first glance, you might think, oh, this is just an open and shut suicide case.
Yeah.
But when you start looking into the details, it's a lot more unsettling.
It is. And it really, I think, exposes a lot of the things going on under the surface, right? I mean, we're talking about power, prejudice, and just this struggle that so many people face to actually get justice when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about some pretty serious stuff today, like allegations of abuse.
Right.
A university that seems to be trying to control how this whole story is being told.
Yeah.
And even, believe it or not, tensions between India and Nepal.
So let's lay out what we know so far.
Okay.
On February 16th, 2025, Prakriti, she was a third-year computer science student, was found dead in her hostel room. And those early reports, suicide, that's what they said.
Right.
But the other Nepali students at KIIT, they weren't buying it.
No, not at all. And I think their doubts really came from these rumors that had been going around about Prakriti's relationship with another student there, a guy named Advik Shrivastava.
Right.
And, there were these whispers of abuse, not just emotional, but physical too.
Yeah.
And it seemed like, from what people were saying, Prakriti was in a really, really bad situation.
And those whispers, well, they turned out to be more than just gossip. An audio recording came out, and I've got to tell you, it's chilling. You can actually hear Advik verbally abusing Prakriti in this recording.
Yeah, it's tough to listen to.
The language she uses, it's vile. And he's like manipulating her into apologizing.
It is. It's disturbing, really disturbing. And I think it became a really important piece of evidence in this whole case. I mean, not only did it back up those claims of abuse that people had been talking about, but it gave us a glimpse into what was really going on between them. The power dynamic.
Yeah.
Prakriti, she was clearly in distress. You can hear it in her voice.
Right, and it makes you wonder, did she try to get help?
Well, there are reports that she did. Some people say she tried to report the harassment, that she went to the university's international relations officer.
Wow.
And if that's true, it raises some big questions about whether the school, KIIT really did everything it should have to protect its students.
And then it's like the university's response after Prakriti died, it just made things so much worse. It seemed like they cared more about quieting things down than actually addressing the concerns of the students who were protesting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you would think they would show some empathy, right?
Yeah.
Some willingness to get to the bottom of what happened. But instead, they brought in security. And these security guards reportedly manhandled some of the students who were protesting. And then, get this, they decided to evict all the Nepali students from campus.
What?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It created this atmosphere of fear and chaos. I mean, can you imagine?
It's just so extreme. And then on top of all that, these audio recordings came out, right? Recordings of KIIT faculty members saying some incredibly insensitive stuff about Nepal and the Nepali students.
Yeah, it's hard to believe they would say these things.
One recording, it's this faculty member, Manjusha Pandey, and she's telling students, "What are you doing here? We're feeding you for free."
Oh, my God.
I know, right?
Wow.
And another faculty member, he's bragging, saying that the university's GDP is bigger than Nepal's.
It's so concerning on so many levels. I mean, it makes you wonder about the kind of environment they've created at that institution.
Yeah.
Do they have any sensitivity towards students from other countries?
Mm-hmm.
If these students already felt unsafe, discriminated against, before all this happened with Prakriti,
Yeah.
these recordings just make it that much worse.
It's like they weren't even thinking, like they were completely tone deaf.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe they were trying to shut the Nepali students up? Like to protect someone?
Well, that's the question a lot of people are asking. And, given the fact that Advik's father is a pretty powerful figure in politics,
Yeah.
I mean, his name is Manoj Shrivastava, and he's a BJP leader in UP, you can't rule out the possibility that he might have had some influence in all this.
Yeah, that's true. But we should be careful about jumping to conclusions.
Absolutely.
But think about it. You have a grieving community, a university that seems more worried about damage control than actually finding out what happened. And then these whispers about someone with political connections pulling strings. It's a recipe for disaster. And to make matters worse, the whole thing blew up and became international news.
Yeah, because the Prime Minister of Nepal himself got involved.
Right.
He spoke publicly about what had happened. He was clearly worried, and he wanted India to make sure that all the Nepali students in India were safe.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a big deal. It showed that this case wasn't just a local tragedy anymore. It was something that could affect the relationship between two countries.
And then Nepal even threatened to stop letting its students study in Odisha.
Right.
That would have been a huge blow, not just to KIIT financially, but also politically.
It was a power move,
Yeah.
you know? Nepal was using its leverage to protect its citizens. It showed just how much was at stake, how a single event, something that seems isolated, can ripple out and have consequences way beyond what anyone could have imagined.
So now you have all this diplomatic drama playing out. And back in Odisha,
Oh, yeah.
the political scene was getting pretty heated, too.
Yeah, the opposition parties saw this as a chance to go after the BJD government. They were criticizing how they were handling the whole situation.
Right.
And the Congress Party, they actually demanded a judicial inquiry.
So we have a lot going on here.
Oh.
A potential crime, people saying there was a cover-up, tensions between countries, and politicians fighting with each other.
It's a mess, a tangled web,
It is.
and we need to try to untangle it.
We do. And there's another layer to all this.
Oh.
How the media has reacted to this whole thing, it's actually pretty strange.
What do you mean?
Well, think about it. A controversy with Same and that whole thing with Ranveer, those stories were everywhere.
Yeah.
They were all over the news for weeks.
Yeah, I mean, they got a lot of attention. And you could argue that it was too much attention given what those incidents were actually about.
Exactly. But here we have a young woman who died,
Right.
and the circumstances are really suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
There are allegations of abuse, a university that might be trying to hide the truth.
Right.
We even have two countries on edge because of this. It makes you think, what stories does the media decide are important enough to tell?
Yeah, it's like, are we just more interested in things that are sensational?
Right.
Instead of focusing on issues that are really complex, that require us to think critically about, about society and about politics.
It's pretty disheartening. I mean,
Yeah.
this case deserves so much more attention.
It does.
Not just for Prakriti, but for every student out there, especially the ones who might be vulnerable because they're from a different country or a different background.
And I think it's a reminder to all of us that we need to pay attention to how the media is shaping our understanding of these issues. We need to be more critical,
Yeah.
We should demand better representation, and we need to make sure that those voices that are often ignored, that they get heard.
The investigation into Prakriti's death is still going on. Those who were arrested are facing trial. KIIT is trying to repair its image.
Right.
And India and Nepal are working through those diplomatic problems.
But this whole case has really shown us some ugly truths
Yeah.
about how safe students are on campuses,
Mm.
about how accountable universities are,
Right.
and about the power dynamics that exist in our society.
It's a wake-up call.
Mm.
Universities need to put their students first. They need to be transparent and accountable.
They do.
But this isn't just about universities. We all need to be more aware. We need to speak out against injustice. And we need to demand better from our institutions, from our media.
Absolutely.
Those Nepali students who refused to be silenced,
Mm-hmm.
they're the ones who brought this whole issue to light.
They were so brave. They took to the streets, they spoke out, they demanded justice for their friend, even when they faced harassment, assault, even when they were evicted from their homes.
Right.
They wouldn't back down. And it was their bravery that forced people in power to actually do something.
They showed us what collective action can achieve.
They did.
Even when you're up against such immense pressure, truth and justice can win out.
If you have the courage to speak up,
Right.
It's inspiring. And I think this whole incident should make us all think. We need to hold our institutions accountable. We need to make the world a place where students can learn and grow without being afraid.
In this case, it's far from over. We need to keep paying attention. We need to demand accountability and transparency, and we can't let tragedies like this just fade away. They need to be the catalyst for change.
Exactly. Prakriti's story, even if it hasn't been in the spotlight as much as it should have been, it started a conversation.
Yeah.
It's shown us these systemic issues that we need to address to prevent something like this from happening again.
And it's up to us to make sure that her death wasn't in vain,
It is.
that her story leads to real change.
Justice delayed is justice denied. We need to hold those in power accountable. We need to fight for a future where these kinds of tragedies aren't just swept under the rug, but where they force us to create a safer and more just world.
Stay informed,
Oh.
stay engaged,
Oh.
and most importantly, stay vigilant. This story isn't over, and your voice matters.
Thank you for joining us as we explore this really complex and disturbing case.
We'll be back to continue this conversation, so stay tuned.
So KIIT, they were under a lot of pressure
Yeah.
from everywhere, from India, from Nepal. They had to do something.
Right.
And they did, but at first it all felt kind of, I don't know.
Empty.
Yeah, empty, like they were just going through the motions.
Right? Like when they released that public apology,
Mm-hmm.
offering their deepest condolences and promising to cooperate with the investigation.
Yeah, it felt more like a PR stunt than anything else, especially after how they had acted before.
Totally. But eventually they did take some more concrete steps.
They did. They suspended Manjusha Pandey.
Good.
And that other faculty member who made those awful comments, they also got rid of the security guards who were involved in that assault on the students.
It was better than nothing, I guess, but a lot of people felt like it was too little, too late.
Yeah, I can see that.
What do you think made them change their approach?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because this all happened around the same time that the Prime Minister of Nepal had that conversation with Achyuta Samanta, the guy who founded KIIT.
Oh, wow. So there were some high-level talks going on behind the scenes.
Exactly. So you can see how that international pressure probably played a big role.
Yeah, and I bet the fact that they could lose all those Nepali students, that probably didn't help either.
No, definitely not. I mean, those students bring in a lot of money for KIIT, so they were facing pressure from all sides, political and economic. They had to show they were serious about taking action.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But let's talk about what really matters here. Justice for Prakriti.
Right. Well, the police had already arrested Advik Shrivastava. They caught him trying to get out of Bhubaneswar.
Oh, wow. So he was trying to run.
Looks like it.
And what did they charge him with?
Abetment to suicide?
That's a serious charge.
It is, under Indian law.
And what about the people who work for the university?
Right, right.
It seems like they should be held responsible too, right? For not doing anything when Prakriti asked for help and for trying to shut down those student protests.
Yeah, well, they arrested 3 of the senior officials. The registrar, the director of student affairs, and the chief security officer.
Wow, so they're taking this seriously now.
It seems that way. But we have to remember, these are just arrests.
Right.
The legal system, it's complicated, it takes time. And proving abetment to suicide, that's a tough one.
How so?
Well, the prosecution has to prove that the person who's accused actually meant for the victim to commit suicide.
Oh, okay.
Like, they have to show that there was a clear intention there. And that's not always easy to do.
So what happens now? What should we be looking out for as this case moves forward?
Well, the investigation is still going on. The police are gathering evidence, talking to witnesses, trying to build a strong case. And eventually, the accused will have their day in court. That's when, hopefully, the truth will come out.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
But even if they get convicted, there are still so many questions.
I know. Like, why didn't the university listen to Prakriti when she said she was being harassed? Was there really an attempt to protect Advik because of his father's connections?
Those are big questions.
They are. And this whole situation, it's exposed some deep problems in our system, problems that allow harassment and abuse to happen on campuses. Universities have to make student safety a priority.
Yeah.
They need to be held accountable, and they need to show that they take these allegations seriously.
Absolutely. And we can't let this just become another story that people forget about.
No.
It needs to change how institutions handle these kinds of things. And we can't forget about the bigger picture here, how this has affected the relationship between India and Nepal.
Yeah, it's definitely put a strain on things.
It has.
And it shows how important it is to be sensitive and respectful in these international relationships, especially when you're talking about students who are studying abroad.
This whole case, it started with a personal tragedy, but it's become something much bigger.
It has.
But there's one thing that really stands out to me.
What's that?
The courage of those Nepali students.
Oh, yeah.
They refused to be silent.
They were incredible. They took to the streets, they raised their voices, they demanded justice for their friend, and they faced so much harassment, assault, even eviction.
I know. It's amazing how they stood their ground.
It is, and it was because of them that this whole issue came to light.
Right.
They forced those in power to take action.
They showed everyone what can happen when people come together and fight for what's right.
Exactly. And even when you're up against so much, even when it feels like you're fighting an impossible battle,
Yeah.
truth and justice can prevail if you have the courage to speak up.
Their resilience is inspiring.
It is. And this whole thing, it should be a wake-up call for all of us. We need to hold our institutions accountable. We need to create a world where students can learn and grow without being afraid.
This isn't over yet. This case is still going on.
Mm-hmm.
We need to keep paying attention. We need to keep demanding answers. And we can't let tragedies like this just be forgotten. They have to lead to real change. We've talked about Prakriti's death, the aftermath at KIT, and how India and Nepal are dealing with all of this. The investigation's going on. The legal stuff is moving forward. But you know what? There's this other thing that really makes you think about what we focus on as a society.
What's that?
The media and how they've covered this whole story.
Yeah, that's a good point. The media has a huge influence, right? They shape how people see things, and they can hold people in power accountable.
Exactly. And in this case, the way they've covered it or haven't covered it raises some red flags.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Remember that controversy on India's Got Talent with Samay and that whole thing with Ranveer Singh's photo shoot? Those were huge stories. They were everywhere.
Yeah, they were all over the news for weeks. And you could argue that maybe they got more attention than they deserved.
Exactly. But here you have a young woman who died, and it's super suspicious.
Right.
People are saying she was abused.
Yeah.
The university might be trying to hide the truth. We even have two countries at odds with each other because of this.
It's a big deal.
It is. And yet, it feels like the media is barely paying attention.
That's true. It makes you wonder why some stories grab everyone's attention while others, maybe even more important ones, get ignored.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Is it because we just love drama? Like, we're more into sensational stuff than things that make us really think about society and politics.
Maybe. It's something to think about for sure.
It's kind of depressing, honestly. This case needs more attention. Not just for Prakriti, but for all students who might be going through something similar. Especially students from other countries, you know?
Yeah.
It shows how vulnerable they can be.
It does. And it's a reminder that we can't just blindly accept what the media tells us. We need to be more critical, ask questions, and really search for those voices that are often missing.
So where do we go from here? The investigation into Prakriti's death is still ongoing, right? Those who were arrested, they're facing trial, and KIIT, well, they're trying to fix their image. India and Nepal are still dealing with all the diplomatic fallout. But this case has really shown us some harsh realities.
It has, about student safety, about holding institutions accountable, and about the power dynamics that exist in our society.
Exactly. It's a wake-up call. For universities, sure, to put their students first, to be transparent, and to be held responsible for their actions. But it's also a wake-up call for all of us, to be more aware, to speak up when we see something wrong, and to demand better from our institutions and from the media.
I agree. You know, this case might not be over, but it's already made people talk. It's brought those systemic issues to light, those things that need to change so that something like this doesn't happen again.
Right. And we can't let Prakriti's death be in vain. Her story has to lead to real, meaningful change.
It does. Justice delayed is justice denied. We need to hold those in power accountable, we need transparency, and we need to fight for a future where these kinds of tragedies aren't brushed aside, but instead they force us to create a safer, more just world for everyone.
So stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions. This story's not over, and your voice matters.
Thanks for joining us as we tried to make sense of this complex and disturbing case. It's been a heavy one.
We'll be back with more deep dives, so stay tuned.